Okay, let's talk about the seed plants. Last chapter, chapter 29, we talked about the non-vascular plants and the vascular non-seeded plants. So let's talk, or seedless plants rather. So let's talk about the plants that do have seeds, the gymnosperms and the angiosperms. Seeds evolved fairly early in plant evolution. So we learned last time that the first land plants, we have fossil evidence of a little over 400 million years ago. And we have fossil evidence for the first seed plants about 360 million years ago. Now this is 100 million years before the first dinosaurs. So this was fairly early. There, most of the land vertebrates at this time were all early, very early amphibians. So a seed is a further way to protect the growing little sporophyte embryo. So the zygote is the new diploid cell that results from from fertilization, and the little zygote starts to divide. It forms an embryo, and in plants that embryo is going to be the sporophyte of the plant, no matter what kind of plant we're talking about here. So in gymnosperms and angiosperms, that sporophyte embryo is contained within a seed, which is a protective coat. So there are a few other adaptations that are seen in the seed plants. One is vastly reduced gametophytes. We saw in the vascular seedless plants like ferns, they still have a gametophyte that lives independently, but it's very small. In gymnosperms and angiosperms, the seed plants, we no longer can even really see the gametophyte. It's very tiny, in some cases microscopic. They also have heterospory, which means that spores are, remember spores are haploid, spores form the gametophytes in the other plants and here as well. And so with the seed plants, hetero means different, so that means there are two different kinds of spores, large spores and small spores. The large spores, the megaspores, are going to eventually form the egg. Those are the female and the female gametophyte cells, and the microspores are going to form the pollen granules, which are the male gametophyte. So here is our most primitive group of plants, the non-vascular plants, which do not have seeds. And in these plants, like mosses and liverworts, the gametophyte is dominant. The green plant that we see is the gametophyte, and the sporophyte is completely dependent on the gametophyte. It grows out of the gametophyte, and in the case of liverworts, is quite small. That is where we end up with our meiosis and then our haploid spores, which then grow into another gametophyte. With our vascular plants, the seedless vascular plants, we have now the sporophyte is the dominant plant that we see, like in ferns. There is still an independent gametophyte, and the gametophyte is essential. The gametophyte allows that little unprotected sporophyte embryo to grow. So the spores here, the haploid spores grow into the gametophyte, and then the gametophyte produces the gamete. Gametophyte produces gametes. Sporophyte produces spores. The gametophyte, this is where fertilization is going to occur in the archegonium. And then that little diploid new embryonic sporophyte grows completely dependent on the gametophyte. So the little embryo is dependent on that gametophyte, which is still an independent plant. And this dependence of the sporophyte on the gametophyte is going to continue with our seed plants, only now the gametophyte is so small, it's actually still inside the gametophyte, and it's going to be inside the seed. So now our more primitive seeded plants, the gymnosperms, we'll talk about those first. Those are the ones that evolved first as well, which is why we consider them to be more primitive. We have male and female cones, and in the female cones, that's where fertilization is going to occur. And in the male cones are going to produce little bitty gametophytes, which are actually the pollen that's going to make it to the female cone and first pollination, then fertilization. And then we'll talk about the angiosperms as well, which have many angiosperms and gymnosperms, being both seeded plants, have a lot of things in common. The big advance in the angiosperms is having the seeds enclosed in a fruit. And all angiosperms produce fruit. It's often not the kind of fruit that you think of when you think of fruit. The fruits can be dry or hard or even poisonous or unpleasant in some way. So seed plants are heterosporous. So the sporophyte produces two kinds of spores, and in general, almost all of these plants, a single plant produces both male and female spores. It's not always true, but it's mostly true. Ferns are homosporous, and so are many other of those more primitive plants that we looked at are homosporous, which means they only produce one kind of spore, and that spore grows into a gamete which can produce both male and female gametes. Seed plants are heterosporous, which means that there's two different kinds of spores, and they're predestined to be either a female or a male gametophyte when the spore is first produced. So we call these spores, based on what they're going to produce, either megaspores or microspores. So mega means big, so that lets you know right away that the female gametophyte spore is going to be big. It's bigger, and megaspores produce a female gametophyte, which is going to give rise to the egg and ultimately the seed. And that all happens within the ovule, and well, let's not worry about this word. So the megaspore is going to produce ultimately the egg. So here we have, this is a female cone here, and in each one of these little ovaries here, we have our megaspore. So remember, spores are haploid, just like with the ferns. Meiosis occurs to produce the spores. So here we have our single haploid megaspore, and that's what's going to produce our egg. So it's going to divide by mitosis and produce several cells, and one of those cells is going to be the egg. So our egg nucleus is produced here. Here's our other cells that come from the megaspore. So the megaspore is going to divide by mitosis and produce the female gametophyte, which in seed plants is extremely tiny. In gymnosperms, it's a few cells. In angiosperms, it's down to 3 cells. It's the female gametophyte. So one of the cells that's produced by the female gametophyte is going to be the egg, and that is what's going to be fertilized by the male gametophyte. So the male gametophyte is the one that moves. That's the pollen grain. The pollen grain releases a nucleus. Now we don't have, for most of these, it isn't a flagellated sperm, although we'll talk about a couple of exceptions to that. For conifers, they don't have flagellated sperm. Instead, there's a pollen tube that allows the sperm nucleus to fertilize the egg. And then the little embryo, because now we have a fertilized egg, we have a zygote. The zygote is going to start to divide and form the embryo. And the embryo, this is the embryonic sporophyte. So the embryonic sporophyte will start to grow and form a tiny little embryo that might have hundreds to thousands of cells. And then it has a food supply, which is partially made by the female gametophyte, and we'll talk more about that. And then it's surrounded by a coat that's resistant to the environment. So the surrounding tissues here make a hard, water-resistant shell that will help protect this seed. Many seeds can pass through animal digestive systems without being damaged at all. So here's some nice pine pollen, and you can see the nice little nucleus inside of here. So this is the male gametophyte of conifers. Looks kind of like little Mickey Mouse ears. So pollination is not exactly the same as fertilization. Pollination can only occur in plants that have pollen. So if the plant has flagellated sperm, like ferns and liverworts, then doesn't have pollination, it has fertilization. But in plants that do have pollen, like most of the seed plants, pollination refers to pollen making it to the structure that contains the ovules. It has made it to the ovary of either the same plant or another plant. And then that pollen grain is going to germinate, and a little tube is going to bring the nucleus to the egg and allow fertilization to occur. So usually pollination is followed by fertilization of the egg cell by one of the nuclei that is brought by the pollen. The advantages of seeds, there has to be an evolutionary advantage to seeds because seed plants totally took over. Before seed plants evolved, the seedless plants and the non-vascular plants were the dominant plants on Earth, on land. And once seed plants evolved, they took over. And now and so what are the advantages? The advantage is the little sporophyte embryo is protected and packaged along with a food supply, and they can lie dormant through very dry conditions for years until conditions are favorable for germination. They can survive freezing conditions very well, and they also don't have to photosynthesize right away. They don't have to have a living gametophyte to live off of like a fern embryo does. The fern sporophyte embryo has to have that living gametophyte to mooch nutrients off of. But for the seed plants, they have the nutrients are already packaged in the seed. And the larger the seed, the bigger the cache of nutrients there are. So a coconut is a really large seed. And so coconuts can germinate and grow in areas that have very poor nutrient availability because of that. Some seeds are extremely tiny, like orchid seeds are really, really tiny, and other seeds are quite large. This is a bean germinating here, and they're known for having quite large seeds. Seeds also allow plants to disperse over long distances. Seeds can be blown by the wind or carried by animals and germinate very far from the parent plant. Gymnosperms, gymno in Greek means naked, and we get the word gymnasium from this same root because to the Greeks you were supposed to exercise naked, so that's why the gymnasium is called that. So gymno means naked, so gymnosperm is naked seed, meaning there's no fruit. So the angiosperms, the seeds are enclosed in some kind of a fruit. For gymnosperms, the seeds are not enclosed in a fruit, so they are naked. So the seeds are on the sporophylls, usually in cones. So most gymnosperms have some kind of cone. So I'll show you some different examples of them. This is from a California redwood tree. Their cones are actually quite small. It varies in size. Some cones are hard, like pine cones. Some cones are they call them fleshy cones because they're soft. They do the same thing though. So here's the gymnosperm life cycle. Let's start with the mature tree here. Here's our sporophyte. Remember, the plant we see is the diploid sporophyte. And we have two kinds of cones. The cone that's going to produce the female gametes and the cone that's going to produce the male gametes. So sporophytes produce spores. So our female cone is going to produce the megaspore, because the megaspore is the large, it's going to produce the egg. Mega means big. So our megagametophyte is going to be produced from the megaspore, and the female gametophyte is going to contain a few to hundreds of cells in gymnosperms. And one of the cells that the female gametophyte is going to produce is going to be the egg. And the egg, it's already going to be haploid, so meiosis occurs to produce the spore, and then the spore divides by mitosis to produce the egg and some of the surrounding supporting gametophyte tissue. The same thing is happening in the male cones. The microspores are going to produce the pollen grain. So the male gametophyte is the pollen grain. The pollen grain, see it says haploid. Pollen grains contain 3 cells usually, and one of those nuclei is going to fertilize the egg. So then we get our diploid individual fertilization occurs. So pollination is when the pollen grain gets to the right place on the right species of plant. And then fertilization is when that pollen nucleus fuses with the egg nucleus, and now we have our new diploid individual, which starts to grow. So in the seed, we don't just have a zygote, we have a little embryonic plant. Our little new embryonic sporophyte, which will have hundreds to thousands of cells, and it's ready to go when the right conditions occur. The very first good fossils of gymnosperms are about 380 million years ago. As I mentioned, this is one of the first species that's been identified in the fossil record. It's hard to tell anything from this fossil over here, but I trust the paleontologists when they say that this species, Archaeopteris, was a heterosporous tree with a woody stem. And it's the closest ancestor to the seeded plants. We know that gymnosperms were food for dinosaurs. There were a lot of herbivorous dinosaurs that, gymnosperms were the dominant land plants at the beginning of the age of the dinosaurs, so they were eating them. We'll talk about the 4 main groups of gymnosperms, but by far, most of the gymnosperms are in the conifers. These other 3 groups are very few species and are quite rare, and many of them are endangered. And we'll talk about those. Cycads are pretty rare. There aren't very many species left. Most of these in the wild are endangered. They're extremely slow growing. They sort of look like really short palm trees. They're very popular yard ornamental plants. I've seen a lot of people who have them as potted plants, and I've seen other people, especially in Florida, who have them as yard plants. They're highly desired. They grow really slowly. They're expensive. There was a rash of thefts a few years ago in Florida. Somebody got the bright idea to steal mature cycads out of people's yards and sell them because they're actually worth a lot of money. But they're pretty cool, and they do have flagellated sperm. They don't produce pollen. So again, if a species has flagellated sperm, that means they need a film of water for fertilization to occur. So these species have to occur in places that get enough rain that fertilization can occur, because the sperm have to have at least a film of water to swim in. These were very abundant during the age of the dinosaurs, but now they're quite rare, and we don't have any native ones in Illinois. Another group is the ginkgos, and ginkgos, again, they were really abundant during the age of the dinosaurs. Dinosaurs ate them. Dinosaurs ate their fruit. The one remaining species, so this is a phylum with only 1 species in it, and that's actually kind of unusual in all of biology. There's a few weird examples of an animal or a plant that is the only species in an entire phylum. Usually phyla have hundreds or thousands of species in one phylum. So this used to be a large group of related trees during the age of the dinosaurs. There were many species of ginkgo. They all went extinct with the dinosaurs, however. And we think this is probably because their seed dispersal was dependent on dinosaurs eating them. And once the dinosaurs went extinct, there was nothing to disperse the seeds. And that's a problem that the current ginkgo biloba, has. There's only one animal, well, besides humans, that eats ginkgo fruit, and that's a cat. The civet in China is the only known wild animal currently that eats the ginkgo fruit voluntarily. Birds avoid it. Even rats won't eat it. And that's because the fruit, it's not fruit, it's a seed. It's kind of a soft seed, so people often call it a fruit, but it's really not a fruit, it's a seed. This tree is nicknamed the vomit tree. Most of the ornamental ginkgos that you see are male trees. So ginkgo is one of those trees that's dioecious, so there's female trees and male trees. And if you want to have fruit, you have to have a female tree. And it's actually really hard to find a female tree. Botanists usually keep track of where female trees are. They're usually on university campuses because no one wants one in their yard. They're called the vomit tree because that's exactly what the fruit smells like. When I was in college, there were 2 female ginkgo trees on campus, and they were well known because in the fall, all these seeds would fall to the ground on the sidewalks. Everybody would walk on them, and it smelled exactly like vomit. And the squirrels didn't eat them. Nothing eats them. But it's because it's such a weird, rare tree, we like having them around anyway, even with that. They're a really popular ornamental tree, but a lot of people are trying to discourage people from growing them, not because they're invasive, because they're not, but that they're not very useful to plant, because especially in the United States, not a single wild animal eats the ginkgo seeds. There are people who eat them. Supposedly, when you cook them, they taste kind of like weird cheese, but they smell really bad. So go for it if you want to. Another weird group is the netophytes. There are very few species of the netophytes left. These are some of the genera. Welwitschia, there's a few species of Welwitschia, and Netum, and ephedra. There's only a few species in each of these genera, and you can tell that these are genera because they're italicized, just like, because they're the first word of a species name, so they're italicized. Welwitschia are these huge, weird desert plants. Their leaves just continuously grow longer and longer and longer and lay on the ground, and then the ends of the leaves kind of die and get beat up, so you can kind of see these long, long leaves, and then these weird beat up ends of the leaves. So the leaves just continuously grow. They rarely produce cones. So some of them only produce cones every decade or something, and there are only a few species. Netums are another very few species of these. They're in the tropics. And then ephedra, the genera ephedra, you probably have heard of that. There is a drug that's made from ephedra that's a stimulant. It's was used for people with asthma as an herbal medicine. It was used for weight loss because it's like an amphetamine, and it makes your heart race, and it's an appetite suppressant, but it's now illegal as a food supplement because people died from taking it. So don't take ephedra without supervision of a doctor, because your heart could stop and you might die. So don't do that. But it's in this weird phylum, the Netophyta. The conifers, most species of gymnosperms alive today are conifers. The conifers are both the largest plants known. The redwoods are the largest plants known, and also the oldest plants known are also in the conifers. oh, what's the name of it? Bristlecone pine, I think. They are in the American Southwest. They're the oldest trees in the world. There are some specimens that are almost 3,000 years old. So conifers have been around for a long time. They're very hardy and tolerant of poor environmental conditions. Because they're evergreens, most of them are evergreens, so that means that they can photosynthesize year-round, although they tend to really slow down in the winter. Junipers are another one of those plants like ginkgos that has male and female trees. So if you want juniper berries, which are used in quite a few food products, they're the flavor in gin. They're used in quite a few different sorts of stews and things in Eastern European cooking as well. But if you want to have juniper berries, you got to have a male tree and a female tree. Holly is like that too, but that's an angiosperm, I think. Oh, here's the bristlecone pine. I don't know why this picture shows one that's mostly dead. It has a few live branches over here. But the bristlecone pine trees are the longest lived organisms on the planet. They're specimens that are thousands of years old. Okay, so that's the end of this video. And the next video we'll talk about angiosperms.